Welcome to the Wired for Wellbeing podcast, where we explore how understanding your nervous system can transform the way you live, love, and relate. You've done the work. You understand yourself. You know where your patterns come from. So why doesn't anything change? Maybe it's how you show up in relationships or how you feel about intimacy. Maybe it's anxiety that won't settle. Maybe it's reactions you see coming but can't stop. Understanding alone doesn't fix it, and mere awareness doesn't stop it. Here's what's missing. Your nervous system is still running old patterns, even when your mind knows better, and shame is often the invisible force keeping you stuck. Today, you'll discover why insight alone isn't enough and what it actually takes to create and maintain real change. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein. I've been a practicing clinical psychologist for over 4 decades, and over that time, my experience has been that we are inherently wired for well-being. We all hold the keys to greater happiness, ease, and connection in our lives. However, we are not taught how to access these capacities. When you work with your nervous system instead of against it, life opens up with more compassion, freedom, and ease. I'm joined by my good friend and producer, Steve Lessard. Hi, Steve. How are you doing today?
Hi, Jeffrey. I'm great. Hello, everybody. Excited to be here today.
Me too. Each week, we use real questions from listeners like you as doorways to explore how we each can work with our nervous system. Because while our stories differ, all of our nervous systems speak a shared language. If you'd like to leave a question, the number to call is in our show notes. So let's dive in. Steve, what do you have for us this week?
Jeffrey, here's our question this week. It's a written question, and I'll read it to you, and then we can discuss what's going on.
Sounds good.
I am a 54-year-old man who endured years of childhood neglect and indifference, alternating with sexual and emotional abuse. My parents seem to bond in their mutual indifference and contempt for their children. After years of therapy, I have a much better understanding of the psychological impact. I am only now wondering about the nervous system impact and how it might be affecting my life. Specifically, I've been twice married, and since then have had a few more relationships that all seem to fall apart in similar ways. At the start, it feels great. I feel attraction, connection, and happiness. Then slowly, closeness begins to feel smothering, and I don't desire intimacy, emotionally or physically. I start to avoid connection to the point of making up reasons to come to bed late, if at all. I can see this happen, but I cannot seem to stop it. At this point, maybe I don't want to be in any relationship. Why do I keep doing this? What is happening with my nervous system? Why does it drive this same approach avoidance behavior? Jeffrey, what are you hearing in this question?
I'm hearing a lot, but first what I'm hearing is this individual's pain, that they've spent time in therapy, they've been in relationships, and they find that this pattern, in spite of their best efforts, their best intentions, and their time, energy, and money investment in therapy, that they understand their past from a psychological perspective, which is very helpful, but they feel powerless to intervene or stop this cycle from kind of hijacking their life. And, I think that, by the way, that's a pain so many of us face, is many of us know better. We may even have insight as to why we do things, but we may have a perfect understanding of what makes us angry or hurt or avoiding things. But, and this is where a nervous system perspective brings a different focus that really allows us to see a bit more under the hood. Because the part of my mind that can understand the narrative of my childhood and to put together the story of what happened to me, that's helpful. But the part of me that holds that's the part of me that's in regulation when I hold it. And most of us don't really have problems when we're feeling regulated, fairly calm, present, not overwhelmed, not hijacked, not overly anxious or despairing, but okay. And the fact is, most of us, when we're in regulation, don't encounter the same intensity of problems that we do the moment we begin to spend more of our life living from dysregulation. So, the part of him that's grown up with this awareness, this insight, has developed this capacity to see and understand the arc of his life and how it shows up in these relationships, again, is really an important piece. But insight alone will not be able to help him make this kind of a change. My early training was as a psychoanalyst. And so that's as far as you can get from working in some ways with a nervous system perspective. And I really realized that it does help people get good insight, but it doesn't give them the tools to actually change the way that their nervous system responds. And that's what drives us into difficulties and conflicts. So that's the first thing that pops out to me, Steve. What about you? What pops out to you from this?
Well, hearing you share that, is it like as simple as understanding that there's a regulated part of me that can see things clearly and knows there's a better path and knows that the work that I've done and yeah, the understanding that I've brought to my life that I should have a different response. But then there's a dysregulated part of me that naturally gets stuck in the loop. Is it as simple as that understanding that you're describing?
Yeah, I mean, again, part of what we look at in this perspective and what's looked at in general in a polyvagal perspective is the state of our nervous system determines how we see the world and ourselves. So if I'm angry, I may feel angry at the world, then my thoughts are the world is adversary. I'm the victim. I have to fight for my rights or to be heard or to get what I need. It's all being driven by the state. And when we're less driven, when we're regulated, we're much less driven by these defensive states. We then have the capacity to really understand in a deeper, more thorough way what's going on. But when any of us become either activated higher energy, going into fight, flight, or freeze, or getting sent down to that low energy, despair, collapse, and disappear, a couple of things happen. We uh, get so absorbed in the state that we become the state. Very few of us have developed the capacity to witness the state yet. And so we just get dragged by the activation or the de energization, and we get pulled into that state. And then that's the world that we inhabit until our nervous system resets a bit and we can move out of it. So, what you're saying is true. And our access to states gets a little bit more dimmed the more we're hijacked by a particular state. So the more that I'm thoroughly wrapped in anger or fight, right? The less I have access to regulation, the less I have easy access to being able to calm down and settle and be still. My body, my nervous system, my mind will want to be moving fast. It'll feel hot and angry and irritable. And I can understand why I'm there. But understanding doesn't do anything to shift because shifting has to come not from the top down, driven by understanding, but has to come from the bottom up, from the body and the older parts of the brain first to help reset our system. And that's the simple swap here.
Okay, so our I was going to say caller, our writer this week recognizes that desire from where they want to be to where they are. What's maybe stopping them or getting in the way, making it harder for them to move through that? What's keeping them hooked, as a phrase that you like to say?
Okay. So again, I'm going to have to make part of this up because we don't have a full history of this particular questioner. He did give us a nice full history in terms of his age. He's had this history of pretty horrendous abuse and trauma, a lot of it emotional and some of it sexual. But the idea is parents would alternate between indifference, neglect, and not caring. and then become intrusive, abusive, harmful, hurtful. So either he's alone and detached, or he's connected but he's harmed. So that's going to have trained his nervous system to have this dilemma. All of us are born with a desire. Actually, we're wired to want connection. We look for connection, and we are in some ways actually waiting. Our nervous system waits for connection. So as much as the horrible experiences he had, he also has this healthy wiring in him intact still that wants relationship, that wants connection. And then this part of him that obviously still senses that some quality of connection or sustained connection or sustained intimacy becomes threatening. So many of us have an approach avoidance kind of dynamic in our life where the closer we get to making a decision, the more we back off making the decision because we're afraid it could be the wrong one, or I'm not sure I'm going to make the right one. So we lean in and we lean out, and we lean in and we lean out. So many of us do that. And it's just helpful to notice that that is actually not a psychological weakness, but it's demonstrating that the nervous system is shifting, and it's trying to make a decision without necessarily taking an action, because making a decision can feel threatening. So that's part of what's behind, in general, the more typical examples of approach avoidance kind of dilemmas. Our writer has a slightly different version of that, because approach avoidance seems to cycle pretty fast. It can happen within moments, within days. It's a very fast acting kind of in and out and in and out. Our writer talks about having sustained periods, months or years of being in connection, in marriage, in doing something. And then, after months or some years, he begins to pull away. He begins to, I think he said that it felt happy and he was attracted and liked the connection. There was a lot of energy of really wanting to lean into feeling connected and intimate. And then at some point, that switches. And for him, it becomes like, I don't think he's as conscious yet of the threat. What he's conscious of is that the taste, the attraction of these feelings changes from drawing him towards the other person to repelling him away. And unless he's picked partners that have been harmful or abusive and actually repeated his parents' patterns, which we don't know, could be a part of this, but he hasn't said that. I mean, that could also be why these end, because they get to be conflictual, and he's picking people who are not capable of being close with him back or sustaining it. But we should stay with what he wrote in the letter, which is that at this point, he's seeing it as him. And that's a big piece of ownership. And most likely he's thought about this and talked about it in therapy to sort of know that it's probably not his partners, but that what's universal across everyone he's dated or been in a relationship with is this is the pattern he follows. So while he terms it approach avoidance, I think that it's something deeper than that. And what I would invite our caller to get curious about is to start looking at, and again, this is where a nervous system perspective steps in. Start noticing how his body begins to shift. Like, see if you can notice those movements from I'm feeling good, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling good, to I'm not feeling so good, to this is feeling a little smothering. I need not to come to bed now. I need to back out. I need to be gone, right? If we could invite him to get curious at that, at the earliest possible point, and when he begins to notice his body contracting, his heart guarding, his desire evaporating or being held in effect, turning away from his partner, that's where he'll find he can really learn a lot about what's going on. Because underneath this is fear, and I also believe shame are actually both a part of this long arc for him.
I want to come back to shame in a little bit, so let's put a pin in that.
Sure.
But what I wanted to touch on before we move too far is, so our questioner gets curious. They notice a moment of contraction or pulling away. What's next? Like, what would be the things that you would put on the Post-it note that this person could look down and say, okay, I've noticed contraction. Step 2, step
Okay.
3. I don't know how many steps there are.
Okay.
Could we get a
So
little bit more prescriptive
sure,
in
sure. So again, it's helpful to have a guide or a coach or a therapist doing this work with them just because it's a lot to track. But to start with, just beginning to, first of all, to get to that point, some people have to spend a bit more time in their bodies. And that's where I recommend any kind of practice that develops an increased capacity for a mindful awareness or attention.
like breathing practices, different mindfulness practices, awareness practices?
Exactly. Even somatic practices, like we teach just altering the breath for the long out breath or the face heart connection and staying with sensation, bringing ourselves back to the present feeling of contact is a way of doing that. And it's this ability to refine our capacity to notice our inner experience and how that shifts that attunes us to how the nervous system is talking to us. If I'm not in my body, I'm going to have less and less data about what my nervous system is telling me. Sometimes I can detect it by the quality of the storytelling in my head, the narration. The more vicious and shaming it is, the more I know I'm in shame. But also, like if I'm in my body, I can feel, for example, with shame, the collapse, or with anger, the heat and the pushing. So he may want to begin to do some of those practices. In particular, for this person, I would recommend a really easy practice is the long out breath. And that's making your out breath up to twice as long as your in breath. So you could do an inhale for 4 and an exhale to 6 to 8, or an inhale for 3 and an exhale from 5 to 6. And by doing that, you're very quickly doing two things. You are controlling the breath, which lets the nervous system know if I'm breathing out this way and slower, I'm safe, right? We're talking through the body to the nervous system. But I believe that what's happening is something is making him feel unsafe and he begins this pulling away. And the long out breath is a really, really good practice to help bring us back towards regulation and to down regulate the fear or the panic that's rising up. So it would sort of help him with two causes. It would help develop the beginnings of mindful attention, which is helpful. It would also help him practice a technique that's a direct hack, that's a direct working with the nervous system to help it shift its state from fight or flight, fear or anger, and back towards a more regulated state. So first step is to notice and name what's happening. Oh, I feel heat in my body. I feel tension. I'm feeling afraid. I'm thinking about all the ways I can avoid going to bed tonight. I'm thinking about the movie that I can watch late that my wife won't be interested in and she'll go to bed without me. When he starts planning that, to begin to actually then look at what's going on in the body. And if we begin to let go of the story and direct our awareness back towards the body, we can become aware of sensations of clenching, tightening, constriction, heat, numbness, emptiness. And these sensation fluctuations throughout the body give us data about what state it's in. And knowing that, I can then work to shift the state. So the other thing is that I'm not really capable of being truly curious if I'm in a defensive state. If I'm in fight, flight, freeze, or shutdown, or submit, any of those states, I'm not going to be curious. I'm going to be convinced already that if I'm in anger, the other person's wrong and I'm right. If I'm in fear, I'm in real danger. I'm already convinced. I'm not curious. Am I in danger? No, I am in danger. And if I feel ashamed and horrible, I'm not curious. Are these feelings true? I'm thinking, oh my God, this is the unbearable truth about me. Trying to access curiosity is also inviting us to activate a different region of the nervous system. Our curiosity circuits actually pull us more towards regulation. Just the idea of being aware of and looking at, witnessing experiences or states or sensations in us gives us a little bit of distance. And in that distance, there's space enough to begin to be curious. Well, what am I feeling? So even if he just does the out breath and gets one or two toes more regulated and he's still kind of afraid, he will be able to then, if he so chooses, to get curious about what's making me run away right now. And again, I'm not saying that it'll be easy to come to that answer, because I think that this has been programmed into his system from a very, very, very young age. So it won't be as much driven by conscious thought as much as it'll be driven by a nervous system push to avoid intimacy. We all want closeness, and all of us are a little bit afraid of what we might lose in intimacy: our power, our independence, our ability to rely on ourselves, whatever it is. For anyone desires intimacy and is also a little bit intimidated or afraid because it requires vulnerability.
Let me share my aha moment as you were unpacking that.
Please.
I had wanted to return to a part of this person's question when they asked, why do I keep doing this? And I thought we'd have a discussion about, the trauma they experienced as a child and what may or may not be happening in their relationship. And while that may be true, my aha moment is the why do we keep doing this is because it sounds like on some level, like we just don't feel safe. Like, is that too watered down?
No. But what we want to emphasize, it's a movement from feeling safer to feeling less safe.
Yeah.
If he was always less safe, he wouldn't be able to feel comfortable enough to get into the relationship. But there's something that changes. Now, again, my guess is that it has something to do with sustained closeness and intimacy versus occasional or episodic or more oscillating like it was in the family, right? Where it's neglect and time alone, because he climbs a little bit back towards that when he starts like watching shows late, finding a way to avoid going to bed. He sort of is making his own alone time. And it feels like that's the only way he knows right now of helping his nervous system feel safer is by this withdrawal. So you're absolutely right that there is some sense of unsafety that enters into the equation of the relationship and begins to get him to enact this dance of distance.
So let's return to shame. We touched on it. I wanted to come back to it. It's always amazing to me that shame can show up in so many insidious ways, and it can sometimes be hidden. So
Yes.
I want to give you a chance to maybe help us understand the shame piece here and what may or may not be happening, because I think it's probably broadly applicable to a lot of people listening.
So, I have a fairly broad definition of shame. And I call shame what most people would call shame, these thoughts and feelings of hating ourselves, judging ourselves, deeming that we as a human are inadequate, not enough, we're somehow damaged beyond all repair. But like you said, shame often shows up in hidden and disguised ways. And often shame can come up. Shame is a low energy state, but it can work in tandem with anxiety or anger. So let me just pause that here for a second. In my experience, the thing that requires the most time and the most work to help people really heal themselves is working with the remnants of shame. And those are the longest reaching effects of trauma. Even well after people have worked through the particular incidents of pain or physicality or the horrendous experiences they had, even if they're able to articulate those and process some of those, what remains a bit deep and less touched is this inner sense that somehow they may have contributed to this. Somehow they may have been something that was not capable of being loved consistently by their parents, so to speak. Now, there may be a large part of this person, maybe almost all of him, that gets a sense that his parents were really wounded themselves. Maybe they had trauma. Their damage was what sourced their cruelty to their children, not something in the children themselves. But our nervous system for a very long time, separate from our mind, holds on to the sense that there is something horribly vulnerable, horribly fragile, and horribly inadequate in us that we need to protect at all costs. Because if it's seen, we will lose all connection, all love. So, one of my thoughts about our writer is that he may also quit before he's fired. Because I can't see how he doesn't have shame with this. I know anyone I've worked with would have shame about this. So it's got to be a piece of this, and it's got to find a way to come back out. So one of the ways he could come back out is, here, we're going along, and I like you, and you like me, and we're having a nice relationship, and we're intimate and emotionally connected, and our life is okay, it's good. And then at some point, if shame is still present, it's going to keep pressing that he's going to feel that he's not enough to sustain the relationship, that they'll get a point where he won't be able to tolerate the intimacy, that there's something so broken or wrong in him. And it's almost like he leaves town before he can be fired. He says, yeah, I'll just take a while to get bed. And he starts avoiding the intimacy that could bring him closer to feeling risk of rejection, or risk of feeling unmet, or the risk of more and more investment in his partner, only to fear that she could then switch to the neglect and indifference that his parents always switched to. So I have a feeling, again, I wouldn't call this approach avoidance, because he really does approach it. It's just that when he's in it, he hasn't been able to quiet down the part of him, I think, that is still not safe, not fully safe in a relationship. And whatever it is, I'm imagining that the safety is related to his shame. To, this is either going to repeat to me because this is what I deserve, or this is what I do. I just do this to people, and I'm not capable of having a good relationship. And I think that this individual, if they want a relationship, is more than capable of having one. But shame will kind of tell us that we can't be in a relationship. No one is going to love us, or we won't be able to be a good enough partner. So I think that's the way that shame is playing in on top of the trauma, and that to see how shame begins to limit what he thinks is possible. Like, we use a phrase sometimes in Hakomi, we call a solution can be relational or non-relational. So a non-relational solution is, I don't talk to you about our fight, Steve, that we had with each other. I go off and think about it and write about it and try to take care of it myself. And that's what a lot of people do, especially in families that aren't supportive or pretty dysfunctional. They have to take care of their own needs, their own struggles on their own. Relational problem solving is when I come back and go, hey, Steve, like, you said something the other day and it hurt my feelings. And I just want to check, was there something I did that annoyed you, or did you mean to do that? Were you pissed off at me? That's a more relational approach. I'm not trying to figure it out and solve it all on my own. I'm actually leaning in. That's a vulnerable action. Leaning in and saying, hey, can we talk about this? That's a risk. Our writer doesn't seem, at least we don't know about this, he doesn't seem to do too much relational problem solving when it begins to come up. He sort of begins to get pulled more and more into the withdrawal, the avoidance, and sort of watching himself be withdrawn. We're going to encourage him that if he can find his way back to a little more regulation, he can then get curious and begin to intervene, work with this, right? And also eventually try to bring this back to his partner. Because otherwise, he's playing by the same rules he grew up in, which is everything is his problem. He's got to fix it or run for it all on his own. It doesn't feel like it's a flexible system, like he can't have a problem and find a way to work it out with his partner. So that's how I see shame playing with this.
It seems like that relational aspect, when you name potentially the shame or the challenge, like shame dissolves in the light of day, that there's now a conversation about it. It's not fully the story I'm telling myself. So I see that in what you described. And as you respond to that, if you want to respond to that, you also said a word, Hakomi. I wonder if you could just quickly define that for people who might not know what that is.
Sure. So Hakomi is a system of somatic psychotherapy. I think it's mindfulness-based somatic psychotherapy. is what Hakomi is called. It's been around since the 70s. I was trained and certified in. And it was my first introduction to working directly with the body and using that as an access point versus just using thoughts, memories, and associations as the main way in. And so that's Hakomi. And that's one of the terms that we would use among many to discuss the resources of a person we're working with. Do they seek relational or non-relational solutions? Because while many of us seek non-relational solutions, they actually stand in the way of us resolving things. Because, like you'll hear a bunch of times on this podcast, healing happens in relationship. It happens when we are able to take an issue to someone who's relatively safe and begin to work on it with them instead of having to take our toys and just walk away and say, okay, this is over. I can't deal with this anymore. And by the way, sometimes we have to do that. But I know a lot of people who do that the first moment they feel a little threatened or a little uncomfortable, or like they may not be welcomed as much as they need in that moment. Their nervous system makes them just want to flee right away. Not even wait around, a few months or weeks, but just, okay, I can't see you anymore. Like they'll cut it off that quickly.
Where do you want to leave this question? What's the bow that you'd want to put on what we share with this individual as well as others?
Can you refer to me the last few lines of his question? Because I think in that he had packed in a few points that he was asking us. So I
Yeah,
can make sure
I'll
we.
I'll I'll reread, where he starts to talk about that he's starting to avoid the connection to the point of making up reasons not to come to bed. And then I think this is the part you're referring to. And he says, I can see this happen, but I cannot seem to stop it. At this point, maybe I don't want to be in any relationship. Why do I keep doing this? What is happening with my nervous system? Why does it drive the same approach avoidance behavior?
Okay. So first of all, I'd say this is not his fault. This is absolutely um, a way of seeing what his nervous system learned in his family life about how to manage relationships. And he asked, maybe I don't want to be in relationships, and that may be true, and that's absolutely fine if that's what you choose. My gut feeling is that you do because you keep getting in them, right? I mean, you've been married twice and you've had other relationships beyond that. So it's not like you're a guy who's sworn off relationships. There's something that keeps drawing you to them, and that's important. But there's also something that keeps coming up that creates a separation. You can work on that. And it's going to keep happening because it's driven not by your conscious thought. It's not being driven by regulation. It is being driven by your nervous system perceiving some level of threat about intimacy or losing it, either losing yourself or losing the relationship. And so it starts this familiar dance that you do, which is a dance of distancing. It's not wrong. You're not wrong for doing this. It's your nervous system's way of coping best. What you can do is by learning how to work with your nervous system, by learning how to shift it out of dysregulation, you can begin to be more a co-creator of what's going on in your life than just having your nervous system drive the bus of your life all the time and you watching while you get dragged in and out of relationships. It gives you a chance to actually be there, be in relationship with yourself and with the other person.
I want to share my gratitude for this individual sending their question in, and I deeply hope this was helpful to them and to others to understand some of the patterns that may show up in other ways in their life or similar challenges. Jeffrey, if someone has a question they want to ask, what do they do?
I too would really like to thank our writer caller, our writer questioner this week. It was a really juicy question. I appreciate um, them trusting us with this information and also with their own curiosity. Because again, you're curious about what a nervous system perspective could do. Again, that's your healing calling to you. That's an innate quality of your own healing in the nervous system, seeking for something that will really help you come home to feeling better. If you would like to send us a question, please call 866-357-5156. Or you can send an audio recording, or if you can't do that, simply an email to hello@drjeffreyrutstein.com. And just so you know, registration is still open for a flagship program I created with Sounds True called the Healing Trauma Program, which is a really deep 9-month dive in community about learning how to embody a nervous system perspective, how to develop these skills and tools for yourself, and to actually integrate them into your life, into the marrow of your bones, so to speak, by the time the program's over. If you'd like to learn more about it, if you go to drjeffreyrutstein.com/links, there will be a link there that will take you directly to the Healing Trauma Program. Steve, thank you so much for being my partner in this exploration today. It's always fun.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's a joy to be able to support the community in this way and to bring these teachings and these messages out. And really thank you for helping us navigate and unpack what's going on in some of these really difficult circumstances. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Remember, friends, this podcast is for informational purposes only and isn't a substitute for professional mental or physical health care. If you're struggling, please reach out to a qualified healthcare professional. And thank you so much for being with us today. Until next time, bye for now.